The old man sat across from me at the dimly lit diner, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long since gone cold. His eyes held that peculiar combination of guilt and determination I'd seen in whistleblowers before, people who'd carried secrets too heavy for too long. His name was Marcus, and for 23 years he'd been a slot machine technician at some of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas. Now retired, he'd agreed to meet me after I'd spent months tracking down former casino employees willing to talk about what they called the machines that destroy lives. Marcus began with Frank, a retired teacher from the Bellagio who'd become a cautionary tale among the staff. Every Friday night for 2 years, Frank sat at the same Wheel of Fortune quarter slot near the poker room, feeding it money like it was a hungry animal that might finally be satisfied. $40,000 disappeared into that machine over those 2 years. Frank calculated he'd won back $28,000, convincing himself he was just having a bit of bad luck. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Wheel of Fortune machines, he explained, were engineered traps. The manufacturer paid licensing fees to use that familiar TV show branding, and they offset those costs by programming the machines with return-to-player percentages between 86 and 88%. That bonus wheel everyone got excited about? It hit roughly once every 300 spins. And when it did, the average payout was only 20 to 30 times the bet. Players would spend over $200 in spins just to win $15 or $20 back. But the excitement of that spinning wheel made them forget the mountain of losses in between. Marcus had watched a woman hit that wheel bonus 3 times in one session and leave thinking she'd had a fantastic night. Based on the machine's known statistics and her playing time, he calculated she'd actually lost around $300. The staff had nicknamed these machines the retirement fund killers because they'd witnessed so many elderly players on fixed incomes dumping their Social Security checks into them month after month, seduced by the familiar theme song and flashing lights. Then there was Buffalo Gold, the machine that seemed to be everywhere. Marcus described it as particularly insidious because it appeared generous with its frequent bonus rounds and the promise of massive wins. The reality was far darker. The machine operated on high volatility programming, meaning big wins were possible but statistically improbable to the point of being nearly mythical. The free spins bonus triggered approximately once every 150 spins, Marcus explained, but the vast majority of those bonuses paid out less than 50 times the bet. Players would burn through $150 to trigger a bonus that might only return $30 or $40. The real psychological weapon, though, was the super bonus. That rare occurrence, roughly 1 in every 50 bonus rounds, where the machine would explode with buffalo symbols and pay out 300 or 500 times the bet. Marcus remembered a player who'd sat at Buffalo Gold for 8 straight hours, chasing one of those super bonuses. The machine had triggered the regular bonus 12 times during his session, but not once did it deliver that magical super bonus. By the time the man finally stood up and walked away, he'd lost $4,000. Marcus had been doing maintenance on a nearby machine and watched the whole tragic arc unfold. The third machine on Marcus's list was Lightning Link, Happy Lantern, a game designed with Chinese lantern imagery to attract Asian players. The hold and spin feature triggered frequently enough to keep players engaged, roughly once every 80 to 100 spins. But the payouts were consistently disappointing, usually only 8 to 15 times the bet. What made Happy Lantern particularly cruel, Marcus said, was its aggressive near-miss programming. The machine constantly showed players 5 special symbols when they needed 6 to trigger the bonus, or symbols that barely missed landing during the hold and spin feature itself. These programmed near misses created an illusion of being perpetually close to winning, keeping players locked in their seats for hours. Marcus pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket pocket. Inside were notes he'd kept over the years, including the case of a woman who'd played Happy Lantern every weekend for 6 months. She'd kept meticulous records of her sessions, tracking every win and loss. After triggering the hold and spin bonus over 300 times, only 8 of those had paid more than 100 times her bet. At the end of 6 months, she was down $12,000. The Game of Thrones machine was next, and Marcus's expression darkened as he spoke about it. The licensing fees for the HBO brand had resulted in return-to-player percentages between 86 and 89%. But what made it truly dangerous was its complexity. Players could choose between 4 different game modes based on the houses from the show, and most selected Targaryen because of the dragon theme, not realizing it was programmed with the highest volatility and longest gaps between bonuses. But the real trap, Marcus said, was the gamble feature. Players would trigger a decent bonus, maybe $60 or $70, and the machine would offer them the chance to risk it for something bigger. The programming heavily favored the house, but the feature was presented in such an exciting, tempting way that players couldn't resist. Marcus had watched a man hit a $200 bonus, gamble it, lose it, and then spend the next 3 hours trying to trigger another bonus to win back what he'd voluntarily thrown away. By closing time, the man was down $1,500. Then Marcus told me about Tony and the 88 Fortunes machine, and his voice took on a tone I can only describe as haunted. The 88 Fortunes machine played on the cultural significance of the number 8 in Marcus explained, but there was nothing lucky about it. The machine had a gimmick where players could adjust their bet to activate more gold symbols, supposedly improving their odds. Most players maxed out the gold symbols, thinking they were giving themselves the best chance at winning, when really they were just betting more money on a machine with an 88% return-to-player rate. Tony had been a regular who played at maximum bet almost every day, spinning roughly 600 times per session at $4.50 per spin. That was $2,700 in total bets per session, and he did this 4 or 5 days a week. What kept Tony hooked was the Foo-Bat jackpot feature, a picking game where players selected gold coins trying to match symbols to win one of 4 progressive jackpots. Tony hit the mini jackpot frequently, the minor jackpot maybe once a month, but he was chasing the grand jackpot that could reach $20,000. Over 2 years, Tony put close to $300,000 through that machine. He hit the major jackpot twice, winning about $1,000 each time, but compared to his losses, those wins were meaningless. Marcus paused, his jaw tightening. Tony had hidden his gambling from his wife, taking out credit cards she didn't know about, even securing a second mortgage on their house without her knowledge. When she finally discovered the truth, they had to sell their home to pay off the debt. Tony was banned from the casino at his wife's insistence, and they moved into a small apartment. The cruelest twist? 3 months after Tony was banned, the grand jackpot on his machine finally hit. Someone else won $17,000, the prize Tony had destroyed his life chasing for 2 years. Marcus ordered another coffee before continuing to the 6th machine, Sex in the City. This one, he said, employed one of the most psychologically devastating tricks in modern slot machine design: losses disguised as wins. The machine would celebrate payouts that were actually less than the original bet, complete with flashing lights, triumphant music, and the satisfying sound of coins clinking. A player would bet $2.50, win $1.25, and their brain would register it as a victory, even though they'd just lost $1.25. This deception masked losses and created a false sense of breaking even or only being slightly down. Marcus had watched players burn through $500 in an hour and genuinely believed they were only down about $100 because the machine had been celebrating all those small wins that were actually losses the entire time. He remembered a bachelorette party group that played Sex and the City together because they loved the show. They took turns spinning, cheering each other on, having what appeared to be a wonderful time. After 2 hours, they'd collectively lost over $2,000. But as they left, Marcus overheard them saying they'd almost broken even and had such fun. They had no idea how thoroughly they'd been fleeced. The seventh machine was Wheel of Fortune Triple Extreme Spin, which Marcus described as the original Wheel of Fortune on steroids and exponentially worse. The base game return-to-player rate was even lower, around 85 to 87%, and the machine featured 3 different wheel bonus tiers: bronze, silver, and gold. The bronze wheel was the most common and paid the least. The silver wheel was rarer and paid moderately. The gold wheel was extraordinarily rare and could pay up to 1,000 times the bet or more. The machine triggered the bronze wheel about 70% of the time, meaning players would grind through hundreds of spins at terrible odds, finally trigger a bonus, and get the disappointing low-tier wheel. But the truly diabolical element was the gamble feature that let players risk their wheel tier for a chance at a higher one. About 80% of players took the gamble, Marcus said, because who wants the bronze wheel when gold might be possible? The odds of successfully gambling up were approximately 1 in 10 from bronze to silver, and even worse from silver to gold. Marcus had watched players throw away bronze wheel bonuses 6 or 7 times in a row, each time convinced this would be the time it worked. He'd witnessed a woman trigger the rare silver wheel, decide to gamble for gold, and lose everything. She sat staring at the screen in disbelief for a full minute before walking out, having voluntarily thrown away what would have been a $150 win. The 8th machine was Dragon Link Panda Magic, and Marcus called it a glimpse into the future of predatory slot machine design. When Aristocrat released Panda Magic, they marketed it to casinos as a player-friendly version of Dragon Link with more frequent features. What they didn't emphasize was that while features triggered more often, the payouts were significantly smaller, and the base game return-to-player rate was lower than other Dragon Link games. After Panda Magic had been on casino floors for 6 months, Marcus explained, Aristocrat released internal data showing the machine was retaining players longer than almost any other Dragon Link game, while the hold percentage, how much money the casino kept, was higher. Panda Magic was exceptionally good at making casinos money because it kept players engaged while paying out less. It represented a perfected formula. Give players just enough small wins and feature triggers to keep them feeling engaged and hopeful, but never quite enough to actually get ahead or break even. Marcus knew of one casino that tracked 6 Panda Magic machines over 3 months. Those 6 machines generated more revenue than a bank of 10 older Dragon Link machines during the same period, not because more people were playing them, but because the people who did play lost more money over longer sessions. Finally, Marcus reached the 9th machine, and his voice became almost angry. Ultimate Firelink Tiki Fire was so bad, he said, that several employees, including himself, had tried to convince management to remove it from the floor because they felt guilty watching people lose on it. Management refused because it was too profitable. Tiki Fire had a base game return-to-player rate around 85% and featured the Firelink bonus that triggered frequently enough to seem generous, about once every 60 to 80 spins. But the vast majority of the time, players would trigger the feature with exactly 6 fireballs, get 3 respins, fail to land any additional fireballs, and win only 5 to 20 times their bet after spending 60 to 80 spins to get there. Every once in a while, maybe 1 in 30 or 40 features, a player would get a full screen or close to it, winning a few hundred times their bet. These rare big wins kept people chasing despite 40 disappointing features in between. What made Marcus feel truly guilty, though, was the visual trick programmed into the game. During the Firelink feature, the machine would show fireballs landing just above or just below the visible reels, tantalizingly close but not actually counting. This created a manufactured feeling of almost winning that was deliberately designed to generate frustration and motivation to keep playing. Marcus's voice grew quiet as he told me about an elderly woman, probably in her 70s, who played Tiki Fire every day for months. He'd see her there in the morning when he arrived for his shift, and she'd still be there when he left at night. She had to be losing thousands of dollars a week. One day, while doing maintenance on an adjacent machine, Marcus overheard her talking to another player. She said she was playing with her late husband's life insurance money and believed she was due for a big win because she'd invested so much into that machine. Marcus wanted to tell her to stop, to explain that the machine didn't owe her anything, that every spin was independent, and her past losses didn't increase her chances of winning. But casino employees weren't allowed to give gambling advice to players. He could lose his job. So he had to watch as she slowly drained her late husband's life insurance money into a machine specifically programmed to take it from her. Marcus finished his coffee and looked at me with exhausted eyes. These 9 machines, he said, weren't just bad bets. They were engineered psychological traps that exploited human hope, the gambler's fallacy, loss aversion, and the basic human desire to believe that persistence would eventually be rewarded. They were legal, regulated, and sitting on casino floors across the country right now, quietly destroying lives one spin at a time. As we left the diner, Marcus handed me his old notebook filled with years of observations, calculations, and stories of people who'd lost everything. He'd carried these secrets for decades, watching from behind the scenes as machines he maintained methodically separated people from their money, their homes, their futures. Now, finally unburdened, he walked away into the night, leaving me with a warning that felt more like a confession, a testament to the invisible mechanics of loss that powered those glittering musical machines and the human wreckage they left behind.